Hey folks, welcome to the show. My name is Thilan Rathnaka, and most people call me T. By day, I'm a site reliability engineer, and by night, I'm a whole bunch of other things. I'm a DJ, I'm a content creator, an aspiring writer, and now I guess a podcast host. On this show called Tech Related, we interview interesting people in tech and adjacent fields to learn about their experiences and answer the question of, what do you really do? Through these interviews, we hope to learn more about their stories, their lessons learned, and the overlap that exists within so many fields in this hyper-connected world. If this is your first time tuning in, please check out our website online at techrelatedpodcast.com, where we'll have a link to all of our speakers, show notes, and any other supporting details. If you enjoyed the show, or even if you hated it, we'd love to hear your feedback. Please reach out to us at show@techrelatedpodcast.com. Yep, that's an email. Or tweet us at TechRelatedShow on Twitter. And now for today's very first guest. Today's guest is another longtime friend, fellow basketball superstar, and the man with the vision. Literally, Geoff Dabu, lead web developer at a very futuristic social media company, is a man with the vision that does the pixel-perfect designs, making sure that he's got the highest conversion rate and making the funnel look as pristine as possible. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Yeah, I don't know about that description, but I'll take it. For sure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, Geoff. I appreciate you taking the time to come be on the show again. This is our second time recording due to some SD card shenanigans last time, but adapt and overcome. We're here. We're here now. We're going to have a great show.
Yeah, let's get at it. I'll pretend like everything that's coming out of my mouth is coming out for the first time and it's not just rehearsed. And
yeah, I'm going to pretend you haven't been doing this in the mirror every morning leading up to this.
Yeah, me too.
Geoff, what is your vibe and what are you currently drinking?
What is my vibe? Oh, that's a loaded question. It's a Wednesday, it's hump day, it's nearing towards the end of the day. Just got back from the gym, so I am tired. But for you, T, I'll bring up the energy just for you. So
oh man, appreciate it.
And like, I don't know, to get the party started, I got a beer. So this is Red Horse. This is actually a very Filipino beer. Like if you ever go to the Philippines or if you ever talk to a Filipino person, like they'll know what this is and they'll know that this is a crazy time. So yeah, I'll try and liven it up. Hopefully this helps. We'll see where it goes.
All right. Well, I'll let you know that I'm joining in with you. I'm drinking a Sunripe strawberry kiwi Tetra Pak. Let's go. Awesome. Well, I'm excited that we're going to be hydrated and going to have a great interview. All right, Geoff. So first question, that would be letting everyone know what you do. So Geoff, what is your title? What would people see if they were to go to your LinkedIn right now?
So if you were to go to my LinkedIn, my title actually just recently updated within the last few months. So for a long time, I've kind of just been a web developer, but recently moved into a lead web development position. So in terms of like days to day or day to days, a lot of my time is spent on, I guess, maintaining our marketing website. So that's something that my title doesn't really encapsulate, is the fact that I am a marketing web developer. So it's a little bit different from like the different types of web developers you might find. So you might find a web developer who's more focused on the back end, who's doing a lot of work with, I guess, just like the server side of things. And then you might have web developers who are focused on the front end. So very similar to what I do, but there are some nuances. So with my role, my main, I guess, objective is to maintain and provide features that help the optimization of converting users on our marketing website.
That's a lot of business savvy words. I'm going to break it down really quick. I know you mentioned back end and front end, and I think maybe a good analogy for this is like if you go to a restaurant, there's like back of house or front of house. So if you're looking at like an app or a website, I guess back end is like back of house, the stuff you don't see as a user, like the servers and all that. And then front end is like front of house, so like the presentation aspects and all that, right? Would that be like kind of how you would explain it? Or
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So there's also the divide between app development, so like it's like web app development and website development. So with web apps, things like Facebook is a web app. If you log into Facebook and then you just like start scrolling on your feed within the browser, all those interactions, all the clicking you're doing, liking posts, commenting, that's more within the realm of web app development. But for me, it's more website development. So website development within the marketing realm. I'm focused on, I guess, just like creating pages that help the users convert so that they do end up signing up for our websites or signing up for our web app. So I'm kind of like the storefront for our app. So like we'll get like all sorts of visitors who are looking for something that fills the need. And I guess just to get less general with my descriptions, I work for a company called Later, and our focus is on creating an application that helps social media influencers or social media managers slash influencers slash creators schedule posts within the different social media outlets. So whether that's Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, we help them schedule their content far in advance from when they want to actually post it. So that's kind of like our bread and butter. We got a bunch of other things. Check out our site. You'll figure out and find out what other stuff we have. But
you'll see Geoff's work too.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning, so you're a front end developer. There's web apps, websites. You work on the websites. So specifically for your company, for Later, you help do the website, the one that is used for marketing efforts and is the storefront. You also use the word convert, which I'm going to assume means like you get a user that goes to a website. Conversion means you get them to do what you want them to do, whether it's buy a product, subscribe, or something like that, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing. That's essentially what I do is I build out the pages that entices users to start using our application. So essentially I'm just making later.com, like the easiest way to explain it.
So if I think about like a real world example and like the analogy is a storefront, right? Like I think about some of the best stores I've been to, like maybe Lululemon, Future Shop, shout out Future Shop back in the day, the Shaw ability stores, like all the colors, the ambiance, the aesthetic, that's all you for the storefront, right?
For this storefront. And like obviously I have a whole team and they're very talented. I don't want to take all the credit. Let's put that out there first and foremost. But yeah, that's what my team does. So we're making sure that like everything's pixel perfect and we're following best UX practices and doing a bunch of CRO or conversion rate optimization tests and things like that to entice the user into signing up for our product.
So one of my favorite things in these interviews is like finding the buzzwords and like drilling down into them. We just went over CROs. You also used UX. What is UX? What is a 10,000 foot view answer of what is UX?
UX is user experience. So let's say you go into like an application and UX is really, and I feel like UX designers are just going to like start like commenting in the chat like this guy doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. But essentially just like log on to an app and just like gauge your frustration level. Like if you're super frustrated with your experience with an app or a website, or even just like any like physical product, like a cup or whatever, if your frustration level is really high, then it doesn't have good UX. And what UX designers are doing is making it so that the application or the product has minimal frustration and it's just an easy, excellent time of use. So I hope that's not oversimplifying, but I think that kind of makes sense. Again, don't get mad at me, UX designers, if I did you guys injustice, but I think that's a good explanation.
No, I think that's good. And one thing I actually remember from one of my courses when I went to college is we did like a human computer interaction course. And the one thing that stands out to me is they showed like a picture of like a post-secondary institution and there's a quad, a green field. You see like there's these paths that are on the edges or the border of the field, but then you see another picture, it shows all the footpaths. And interaction is actually like you might build something one way, but the way that people actually end up using it is how they interact with it. And your job is to kind of harness the best way to use an app that is just like natural for the users. The people walking, you might have borders and paths like cobblestoned in, but people are going to take the easiest and best path for them, and that's like interaction. And UX is kind of, I don't know, 100 feet up from that, which is how do people interact with your website or your app, and how do you guide them to achieve success, or in your case, less frustration, right?
So I think that's a good transition into like what makes up a lot of my job is really understanding these potential users. So like these, okay, here's another buzzword, top of funnel. So let me get things straight. Like at the end of the day, I went to school for development and I've been in marketing for a while now. And it's gone to the point where these things just present themselves in passing. So I didn't study any of this. So marketers, it's your turn. I'm going to try and like explain certain marketing terms to the viewers.
Yo, shout out marketers. If you're watching the show and refute these claims, let me know.
One thing I've learned is that marketers are obsessed with this thing called the funnel, where essentially the funnel is kind of just a representation of how far into the conversion process a user is. So there's top of funnel, which are the users who don't really know anything about your site. They maybe just like saw an ad and visited your site, read a few pages, but are very far from actually converting. Then there's middle of funnel and then bottom of the funnel. And like as you progress downwards to the bottom of the funnel, the more, I guess, invested they are into actually signing up or actually even being with the application at that point. Okay. So with the top of funnel marketing, when it comes to the website, a lot of my concerns and a lot of things that I think about on a day-to-day basis is how to understand the top of funnel users better and getting an understanding of what their goals are when visiting our website. So it's really trying to understand the user. And I feel like that's the big premise around UX is understanding the user and providing what it is that they want so that they can achieve their goals when interacting with your product.
Right. So I guess one of the harder parts, or one thing you have to think about more, is top of the funnel. I'm assuming like, those red funnels that you would use when you're baking, like that the top is bigger and the bottom might be smaller. It's more specific. At the top, you're touching more users, way more people. So you have to like keep in mind, like you said, all the different kinds. It might be, someone that's very interested in social media, or someone that's just like, just arrived at the site, because they were like curious about how Instagram is scheduled. And now you're trying to talk to all of them and try to get them to convert and like subscribe, right?
Yes, but there's also a lot of people behind understanding who our users are, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to convert everyone. It's not possible. So we do have a team that focuses on personas.
What's that? That sounds like a buzzword.
It's kind of just like a character type. So I've done like UX courses where we build out personas. You essentially kind of just describe the type of users that you are targeting. Like who are the users that are actually using your application. So like, again, like we won't be able to entice everyone. Like, let's say, I don't know, like there's a fireman who doesn't know anything about social media, but just so happens to stumble across our website. We're not going to be putting in the effort to entice this guy. It's just not worth the ROI, right? At the end of the day, we're going to be crafting all our different marketing channels. So a channel is just kind of like a route for how a user is going to end up on your site. So you can either have like email or social media or like paid ads. Those are essentially channels. So we're going to be gearing the different channels as well as the marketing site to cater to the personas that we know are going to be the most successful with our application.
So with all of that said, like what does your work look like? I'm assuming that since you're in tech, the majority of your time is spent behind the computer screen?
Yes. We're pretty much fully remote. So like even just like interactions and meetings with my coworkers are through the screen.
So like I'm Geoff. I'm the persona of Geoff. I show up to work in my house. I wake up in the morning. I get on my computer. And what do you do for the rest of the day? Like, do you do emails? Do you write code? Like, what are the tangible things that you do throughout your day as a front-end developer?
So it really varies on the day, and it's really hard to put percentages towards the different types of tasks that I encounter on a particular day. But a lot of my time is definitely spent coding. So actually just like building the websites and fixing bugs and stuff like that.
And when you're building the websites and you're coding, what are you working in? Do you work with like HTML, CSS, or do you do backends?
Yeah. So we're currently, so our stack, so basically the application or the list of technologies that we're using for our marketing website is built on HTML, CSS, React through Gatsby, which is kind of just like a React framework for marketing sites. We're hosting on Netlify, so that handles a lot of like the DevOps stuff for us. So we don't have a dedicated backend team or DevOps team, but Netlify is able to do a bunch of that for us and make it easy. But that's pretty much it.
So let me try boiling it down. To summarize, tell me how far off I am. HTML is actually what is like the words on the page. You describe what is going to exist. There will be text here, or you'll say that there's text, or there's a box, or there's an image, and then CSS is the style sheets, right? It explains where that box may go, what color it might be, or background red if you're trying to figure out what you're actually hitting. And JavaScript is the actual doer. It's what happens when you click submit, or like animates things on screen, or does validation to see if you can enter a first name of drop tables. Like, is that kind of?
Yeah, I would say so. An analogy that I kind of like, which really helped me out, especially in the beginning when we were like at school and just learning HTML and all that stuff for the first time, was just looking at like the human anatomy, like at a very superficial level. Okay. So HTML is kind of like the structure. It's what's like holding all of this stuff together. So that HTML is kind of like the skeleton of your page. The CSS is the skin, because the CSS is sort of like styling and like is what's shown on the outside, or it's like presenting things. It's kind of like the makeup on the skin, maybe. I think like JavaScript would, in this case, be like the muscles that sort of like helps everything move and like animate things. But I don't know if that really translates to a human body, but I kind of like it. If you look online, just search like HTML skeleton CSS skin, and you'll find the image that I'm referring to. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, so you're on your computer, you're writing the code, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Tell me more. To continue on this analogy, what else are you working with?
Another big part of my job is I was talking about it earlier, was understanding the top of funnel user group, so the users who are visiting our site. So we run A/B tests quite often through Google Optimize. And just to like take a step back and not get too ahead of myself, so A/B tests are essentially allow us to test two different instances of a web page. So let's say we're trying to understand like what wording works best with a user who's visiting our site. So what we'll do is run an A/B test through Google Optimize, which presents 50% of our users with, I guess, the controls. So like what we currently have on our site when it comes to the wording. And then we'll have a variant which will have the wording that we're hypothesizing we have thoughts of being better. So we'll launch these two different variations. So 50% for the control and then 50% for the variant, and see which one does better just based on the results and the conversions that come up through Google Optimize. We run tests quite frequently, and like we can run full-blown tests. Like this whole example of just like changing the copy is a very like small scale test. Right. We also do A/B tests for full-blown redesigns where we're restructuring the entire page, moving content everywhere, playing with colors, including animations, not including animations. So we definitely do a lot of that as well.
That's pretty cool. It's like optimizing for the best effect by just making multiple iterations and seeing, like presenting a subset to each group and seeing who wants it and who picks it. One thing that's interesting that I found out the other day, A/B testing. YouTube has now rolled out A/B testing for thumbnails. So for content creators that want to see, because the thumbnail is one of the first things people see when they're scrolling YouTube, they can now go through and like do A/B testing to see which thumbnail gets the most hits.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of like different avenues have A/B testing. I know like the email marketers, I think they have a tool called like Litmus or something, which allows them to essentially do the same thing where they like set up a structure, a new design, and test it towards the current design they have and send them out to users and see which email converts the most. And then based on the results, they can take their learnings and then build on it, right? And that's another thing about A/B testing is that sometimes, and like I'm sort of guilty with this too, is that sometimes we'll make a new design and we'll just automatically assume, oh yeah, like this looks so much better, and become very subjective with our hypothesis and like our biases and things. And we'll put it out there. And there are definitely times where we come up with a new design or a new thought process or a new experience, and it doesn't perform as well as the control. So with A/B tests, it's within a controlled environment where you run it for however many weeks or months even, and then take what you learned and then build from there. And sometimes what that means is, okay, the new design that we thought was going to be better isn't better. Let's build from the old design then and go back to the drawing board. So yeah, there's a lot of pros when it comes to A/B testing and doing that approach.
That's like the numbers don't lie. Yeah.
Numbers don't lie. Exactly. Yeah. That's another thing. Like with designers, sometimes design can be pretty subjective and it's very opinion based, even from like designers to designers on the same team. But what sort of helps guide the decisions for the designers, at least for our team, is the quantifiable data, because exactly, like numbers don't lie.
Right.
And if maybe something that you don't think looks as nice converts more than what you actually think looks nice, there's not much you can say. Like if at the end of the day, what the business needs are to convert users and bring users into our application is with the uglier design.
Yeah.
Like you can't say much. Like at the end of the day, numbers don't lie.
And I think it's a good point. You mentioned designers. Now I'm assuming those are folks that you work with pretty often. What's that relationship like working with designers as a front end web developer?
With my designers, it's great. Like, I feel like we have really good communication, but you definitely need to build that trust with designers for sure.
So you build the storefront, the front end assets. Is it that like they give you a Photoshop document? You're like, cool, let me code this up, or like how does that process work on a day to day?
It's pretty much that. The tools we use are a little bit different. So our designers use Figma, which is kind of like Photoshop, I would say, but like more geared towards product slash web slash app design.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll come up with the mockups and then they'll hand over the mockups to us for us to develop. So that's where you kind of need to build that trust and build that communication, because there are times where designers won't understand the full limitations of what a developer can do with code. It's a lot easier to design more intricate things than it is to code the intricate things. That's where the designers and the developers need to build that trust and that communication so that designers can come to the developers, present them with the designs, and be okay with the developers telling them, no, we can't do that just based on the code not working that way. And the thing is, if you don't have good communication, that can cause a lot of conflict. It might turn into a team environment where like designers are frustrated with developers just not accommodating to them and what they want and just like pushing back all the time. But with my team, it's been an amazing time. Like with the designer or the lead designer that's on my team, I've been working with him for 3 years now, and we really built up good rapport between the two of us, where he understands that when I'm pushing back, it's not because I'm lazy and I don't want to do it, and I'm just like, you know what, you pissed me off, that's why I'm like disguising it behind not wanting to do it. Like we have that good line of communication where it's like, okay, designer presents it to me, I'll say, okay, we can't do it, and then he'll take it back and he'll come up with a different design that does accommodate the technicalities and like the restrictions within the code.
Can you give us an example of something that might seem trivial to a designer but is very hard to implement, and then vice versa, something that is like might seem very hard to develop but is actually quite easy to do?
I could do what's maybe hard with design, or what's easy with design but hard with development.
Sure, yeah.
And that animations.
Okay.
And the thing is with development, like it's making really good progress so that the animations that are being done through design are surmountable, like you can do them. But the thing with animations is it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of code for the most part. It's very intricate, and sometimes the designers can sort of like find an example online which is off of like Behance, which is kind of just like a design like portfolio site, and be like, oh, let's do this. And the thing is, it's just like things moving around off the wazoo, and like, I don't know, things coming in, and there being a bunch of like synchronizations with where the user's mouse is. And at the end of the day, like, I'm sure there are very talented developers who can do that, but I'm just going to put myself on blast. There are a lot of animations that I just can't do. And like, if you also take into consideration time constraints, deadlines and things, like those are things that I'll need to push back on, because one, I just don't know how to do them. And like two, if I were to attempt them, I won't be able to meet those deadlines. So yeah, it's trade-offs. Like animations is one. Like I feel like that's a pretty good example.
I just thought of one, and like this is a very trivial example. So like, don't take my word for it. But so I'm helping my dad set up his e-commerce site because he's super into e-commerce now. And one thing that he was showing me, he was just like, "Oh, this I'm trying to do this really hard thing. I don't know how to make it happen." I'm like, "Oh, what is it?" He's like, "Oh, it's really complicated. I'm trying to get this like drop down accordion menu working." And I was like, "Oh, Dad, that's like a really easy one. Let me show you how it's done." But I can imagine that, especially, I mean, I'm not a designer, but I can imagine there's examples like that where it's like, oh, this accordion, that seems like it's hard, like a drop down. But like as a developer, there's frameworks or like stuff that's already been built in. That's like,
yeah, that's a good example. And the thing is, there are a lot of component libraries.
What's that?
Component libraries are kind of like an inventory of pre-built elements within your website. So whether it's like a drop down or, I don't know, a radio button, Like
Mhm.
all the styling, like you can just download and then use within your site, and you don't really need to develop a lot of like the intricacies, like
Okay.
how things like fade in or like how things like move around. It's
Mhm.
all built within the component library.
That's like a way you can have consistency too, I guess, right?
Exactly. And that's what our team has really been striving for is consistency and building up this component library so that when designers are designing things, they use the exact same component library that the developers are referencing. So, I don't know, let's say they want like I don't know, like a drop down.
Mhm.
Because we already built that in the past, what the designers will do is reference that drop down that we used in the past through our component library and then just implement it within the context that they are designing so that the developers they just take it, don't really code much. It's kind of
Right.
almost just like copy and paste or like a one liner, implement it into what we're doing, and then boom, it's done. So yeah, I mean, I think something like that is maybe something that seems harder than it actually is most of the
Mhm.
time.
I've heard a lot of people speak about component libraries in the same vein of consistency, like you mentioned, having that built up inventory. I think it ties in very similar to like style guidelines or brand guidelines. I know there's like industry pioneers or like standards. For example, Airbnb style guide is something that people talk about a
Mhm.
lot. I feel like it's akin to like being an artist and you show up with your bag of like your specific paintbrushes and paint palettes. Like I feel like a component library is a part of that, where you have like maybe like colors palettes, but you also have like the specific props you use, or like the specific like button types, or like drop downs like you said. So that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
With designers, developers, you get designs through Figma, you develop it, you do what you can with time constraints, you animate what you can, but you try to achieve that pixel perfect vision. How do you do all that? Is it like, do you do meetings? Like, what does that process look like? Do you have like, so in for backend engineering for SRE, I know that a lot of companies follow agile, so we do like sprints, which are like a
Mhm.
week or two long, and then you do a stand-up meeting every day to communicate progress, or blockers or things that are preventing you. How do you work as a front-end developer? Do you follow sprints? Do you follow agile? Do you do waterfall? What does that work process look like for you?
Yeah, so we do agile and we work in 2 week sprints. So we'll have like a meeting at the beginning of the week where we discuss all the different topics or the different tickets that we have and bring up any sort of like potential blockers that,
Mhm.
I guess in this case, let's just call it like the scrum master or like the person organizing the meeting or like assigning tasks may not have known. So we'll bring up all like potential issues and roadblocks in the beginning meeting or the start of sprint meeting. And then we also have like a retro towards the end of the sprint. So like after the 2 weeks.
Okay.
So maybe it's a little bit unorthodox. I do find that like different teams and different companies do sprints differently. So like there's a lot of variance and like maybe some of the things that we do are a little bit unorthodox, but something that we do to keep everyone in sync. So between like the designers and developers is we have bi-weekly, I think we just call them web syncs,
Okay.
where we essentially kind of just like talk about the things that we're working on mid sprint, just so that like we have
Mm.
a touch point or a place to discuss things in the middle of the sprint so that not everything is left to the end and like we're just all panicking. And then obviously we have Slack and I have one-on-ones with like my direct reports, like my developers. I have one-on-ones with the designers. I have one-on-ones with my manager, the SEO specialist. I have one-on-ones at a bi-weekly rate, and then one-on-ones with like the designers. So like it seems like a lot of meetings, and maybe it is, but I feel like by having those meetings, it does unblock a bunch of roadblocks that could have came about. So that's kind of how we work in terms of like communicating and like talking with each other. And
So meetings to like set overall goals, strategy, and then talk about things that are preventing you from getting work done or the challenges you're on. And once you have the clarity and all the things unblocked or what to do next, then you can go away, have the focused coding time to actually build the things that you need to build. Okay.
exactly. And again, like I feel like different companies have different opinions on the amount and how frequent you have these meetings, but sometimes we will have meetings and like everything's crystal clear just based off of the beginning of sprint meeting that we had. But especially in a remote world, sometimes it's kind of just nice to have these meetings to sort of socialize with your peers.
Yeah.
That's something that I've not like recently found out, but like now that I'm a manager, sometimes we go into these one-on-ones and we're kind of just shooting the shit. Like there's no real like structure to it. And maybe it's not the best way to organize these meetings. Maybe you need a little bit more structure, but like it works for us. And I feel like with these types of meetings, it really does build chemistry. Sometimes we're not even talking about work. Like, yeah, like the other day I had a meeting with one of my direct reports and we were just talking about road tests. Like she's going to be doing her driving exam soon. And I think for like a good 10 minutes we were just talking about that and like what my experiences were. So again, like different people have different opinions. I'm sure there are going to be people who are like, oh yeah, if you don't need to have the meeting, don't have the meeting because it's just not a good use of time. But I think for me, like it's a good way to build rapport.
Yeah, and I think like people forget that, especially now, like 3 years post 2020, people are like, oh, like you got to be more effective, efficient with your time. But I think people forget that like when you're in office, there's a lot of time that you're not doing quote unquote work, right? Like you're also there's the hallway track, there's the water cooler talk, there's a lot of like stuff that goes into working that isn't just heads down coding or meetings or presenting strategy. And I think that's really important. One thing my team really does too is we have like a coffee time or tea time, and we have like 15 minutes on like Thursday or half an hour on Thursdays, where we just get together and we just chat about anything, everything. I think that's really great, and I'm happy to hear that your org's also doing that. This is my favorite question to ask in interviews: is can you take me through a typical day? And it would be sweet if you can take me through an actual day that you had last week. So like if you want to pull up your calendar and you just like want to go through it, that would be cool. But like if you can also just make it high level and take me through like a day. Like let's say if you want to take me through tomorrow and how it might potentially go.
Let me actually just bring up my calendar. So bear with me.
And this is like the best parts of interviews for me, like to see, like actually put myself in their shoes and imagine what their day is like.
Now at this point, I'm just like trying to cherry pick a day that makes me look more interesting than I actually am. Okay. Actually, we had a pretty we started something new last week. So between the designers and the developers, and so I'll take you through the Friday. So on Friday, I can't remember if I slept in or if I went to the gym. I think I slept in because I was playing Diablo the night before and I was just like super drained. So essentially we had a monthly marketing meetup where we were kind of just discussing, I guess, future plans essentially for the marketing team. So this isn't just the web team. It's all the different departments that we have within marketing. So like the SEO people, also like the social media people, like the email people, everyone. Just had a meeting to discuss like next steps. And I think because like the quarter just ended, there were a lot of things to discuss. So that took up, I guess, like 50 minutes of my day. And then right after, something that we have sort of been working towards is something that we like to call a web team learn together, where because in the world of tech, things are just always moving and constantly changing, we need to keep up to date with everything that's going on with the world of tech. And that's not just like developers, that's like designers. And even if you like extend beyond like the web development aspect, it's like marketers too. So something that we introduced, which we're going to be doing bi-weekly, is this web team learn together, where we essentially just come together and watch like a conference talk or something like that. So last Friday, the conference talk that we watched was from Config, which is a conference hosted by Figma, which is the mock-up tool that our designers.
Right, you mentioned earlier, yeah.
So we watched that video, and essentially within that video, it was just a bunch of people from Google who work on Chrome that outlined all the new things that are coming to, I guess, web development. So that was pretty cool. Like my colleagues and my peers and my coworkers really enjoyed that, because on a day-to-day, like it's really kind of hard to find the time to keep up to date with these types of things. I feel like when you're younger, it's much easier. It's just like, oh yeah, I'll work my 9 to 5 and then bust out a quick 4 hours doing like algorithms and like learning all the new stuff. But yeah, like now that I'm later in my career, it's like, oh man, I can't keep up.
Yeah, so, it can be me.
But the thing is, like, you definitely do need to keep up, but now we kind of just have like an allotted time for it. So that's something that we did on Friday. And then that went from 10 to 11. I had 30 minutes of just like, I don't know, drinking water and like catching my breath and I don't know, checking emails and stuff like that, Slack messages. And then I actually did yoga at the YMCA that's right across my street. So
oh, nice.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, like with my company, and I'm sure with a lot of companies, they treat you as an adult and like Sure, it was at 11:30, which technically isn't lunchtime, but if you're finishing your work, if you're up to date with your tasks and like you're not blocked by anything, then work whenever you want. If you need to go yoga to sort of relax and just like take your mind off work, then feel free and go right ahead. So yeah, I did that from 11:30 to 12:30 and then had lunch for an hour. And then the rest of the day was essentially just, I think, wrapping up. Oh yeah, it was end of sprint last week. So yeah, I finished up a bunch of different types of tasks and closed out my tickets. So maybe not the most exciting, like there were only like 3 things that were sort of out there and then the rest of it was coding, but that was my Friday.
Thank you for sharing your schedule. And I think one thing this really illustrates is something I found from talking to friends in other industries is that for some other industries, it's very much like your time is very regimented from like 8 to 11:30 you are doing this, then you have lunch hour, then you're doing that. There's specific tasks or specific concentration that you need to be doing, whereas I feel like for a lot of our industry it's more that you have the blocks of time and you need to complete your work, but how you do it is kind of up to you. And I think you mentioned that 11:30 it wasn't lunch as long as you get the work done. I think the one caveat is that as long as you get the work done and you're available for the times that you need to coordinate and communicate with everyone, right? So as long as you're there for meetings, obviously, yeah,
of course. I'm not gonna do yoga while I have a meeting with my manager.
Right.
It's like downward dog and it's just like, oh, how's your day?
No, I think I mentioned like there's a lot of people that watch TikTok and like, wow, all these tech people, they just like take lunch at like 11 and just like, watch YouTube videos. It's like, no, that might be the 1 hour that they have between their meetings. I'm sure, and I'm gonna ask you this next question. What is the scariest schedule day you've had? And the reason I ask is because I know we have a mutual friend that once we saw their calendar, and I think their whole day was meetings minus like a 50-minute block at like 3 p.m. We're like, oh, what's this block for? And he's like, oh, that's for me to use the bathroom and grab something to eat. Or like, what is the heaviest day you've had on your calendar?
Fortunately, even though I'm a manager, I don't have too many meetings, but it's very similar. Like the heaviest days where I feel the most strained by the end of are the days where it's just full blown meetings. And I think even the Thursday, like the Friday was pretty chill, but the Thursday I had a lot of meetings. Again, like it really varies between day to day, but from like 9 to 10 I had a meeting, 10 to 10:45 I had refinement, which is what I was talking about earlier, where it's like the end of sprint meeting. And then right after this one, I didn't attend. It was sort of optional, which is like a marketing analytics meeting where the specialist sort of just goes over certain like topics when it comes to analytics. And then after I had a bi-weekly web team collabs. So that's essentially just where like the web team syncs together and discusses things. And then after that, I had a bunch of one-on-ones that took up the rest of my day or left me with like 3 hours to code. But I think what gets stressful is that because I had all these meetings, I didn't have a lot of time to really like get into the code and really focus. Like, it was always being disrupted by a meeting. And because it was end of sprint and I still had a bunch of tickets I needed to wrap up, it gets heavy. Yeah.
So you mentioned one-on-ones, and I feel like I mentioned this topic to a couple of people, especially that they're not in tech. Like, do you just like fight people like 1v1?
Oh.
I mean, no. One-on-one is like when you have a meeting with someone else, like it's a one-on-one chat kind of thing. You mentioned one-on-ones. I think you mentioned a couple of them, and I think that's specific to you because you're now in management. You're a leader of people. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about what it's been like, moving into leadership now, and what that's like now in your job? And how it's how you're liking it and how it might be different from what you used to do.
Yeah, well, first of all, like I feel like I've been in tech for so long, I didn't even think of like one-on-one being a type of thing where you like fight the other person. Like I feel like in tech, one-on-one is like a more of a collaboration time.
And how do you write one-on-ones in emails? Is it 1:1 like fishy symbol one? Like how do you do yours?
1:1. What do you?
I do 1 greater than less than 1. So 1 fishy, basically 1, like on RuneScape.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we do colon. But I guess to answer your question in terms of like transitioning from, I guess, just like a regular web developer or like a more senior web developer on the team to full-blown manager is that I definitely feel more like it's more of my job to actually help build and grow my direct reports. Whereas before it's just something like I did on the side, and if they grew, great. Like this is amazing. And if they didn't, I wouldn't feel as bad about it. Like at the end of the day, like I want my peers and like everyone working with me to like learn and grow, but it's not like a part of my like responsibilities when I was just a regular developer. But now it's part of my job. And if I'm not growing my developers and instilling confidence and putting them in positions where they can progress through their careers, like I'm not doing a good job. So that I find is the biggest transition. And I think it was like just 2 weeks ago, we did performance reviews. So that's something that was a little bit new to me. Like I've only been like a manager for a couple months, so that was the first time I had to do performance reviews. And with the performance reviews, I couldn't just be like, oh yeah, everything's great and everything's honky dory and be on their good side and stuff like that. I really had to sort of dissect where my direct reports could improve and like what are opportunities, and really hone in on like them. Like I'm putting more effort into them rather than like growing myself. But like the thing is, like I'm still growing myself. Like I'm not like standing still, but there's definitely a little bit more emphasis, and I think about my direct reports a little bit more than I used to. And maybe it's just because I'm a new manager, and I'm sure, okay, I pissed off the UX designers, I pissed off the marketers with my terms. Maybe I'm pissing off the managers now by being
no, you're good. You're good.
hard things about management. But
no, managers always get hated on, so it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
But so that's actually a really good point. Your job is to look out for your direct reports, put them in the right situations, ensure that they're being successful, or like, do what you can to help improve them. I think especially like any kind of engineering, like you mentioned cards before, and for anyone that's listening, cards are like tickets. They're like, individual units of work that you take from a stack, and then you're like, I'm going to work on this. And then for the sprint, you work on it. And by the end of it, hopefully you've completed it. And like, I know as an engineer, for me right now, it's very easy for me to know what success is by, the card that I'm working on. Are my cards getting done? Are they going from left to right? Are they good? 3 cards assigned, 3 cards done. Perfect. 100% success rate. As a manager, how do you gauge success for what you're doing? Like how do you know, like, what does success look like to you as a manager?
I feel like that's a tough question, and maybe those are things that I still need to figure out for myself, like as a manager. But
how do you know you've had a good week as a manager?
I think when things are moving swimmingly, like moving without a lot of roadblocks. I think week to week, it's essentially like no big fires, like no big like panic attacks or anything like that. Like I would say that's a good week. But like, okay, so looking at the long term, from point A to point B, what I would consider a success is if, and everyone's management style is different, like if I can see that my direct reports are feeling confident with this type of stuff that they're doing, and they're feeling fulfilled with their tasks, and they're getting a sense of accomplishment, and they're really progressing and learning and like developing their skills. For me, that's what I find fulfillment in, and that's what I'd consider a good week. There's also like the other side of that where it's more like business focused. Like, did we meet our KPIs or our objectives, and like, are we making money? And I'm sure there are managers who focus in and hone in on that, and maybe I should focus on that a little bit more. But for me, it's like my direct reports. If I can see that they're progressing, I would say it's a good span of a couple months or however long.
That's a really good answer, Geoff. And I'm biased because I know you and you're a friend, but I think your people are lucky to have you as manager.
Okay. Keep that in. Keep that in. Don't leave that out.
All right.
Yeah, keep it in.
What was your journey to get to the role that you're in now? Did you have to go to school for what you do now?
Yes, I did have to go to school. I feel like, well, maybe not now because tech is kind of in a weird place, but there are a bunch of people who don't go to school and are able to like get to the point where I am right now. But for me personally, I had to go to school. I went to BCIT for the Computing Systems of Technology program, which was 2 years, where we essentially just learned like the fundamentals of computing. It was very hands-on. So a lot of like building applications and learning code. So different types of languages. We did like algorithms courses, stuff like that. The later 2 years is where we met, and we specialized in essentially network security. Yeah, like 4 years of schooling. A lot of my classmates finished after the first 2 years and were able to get really good jobs. It's kind of embarrassing, but I did the degree program because like I was young and dumb and didn't want to work on resumes. And I just mentally, like, I wasn't ready to get into industry, so I figured, let's just do more school because it's something I was comfortable with. But yeah, I probably could have gotten the same job without it, but I wouldn't have met you. Yeah, we wouldn't have been friends if we didn't do the last 2 years. So definitely no regrets when it comes to that program, for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. What you did in school was computer systems and network security. But what you're doing is front end. How did you make that shift? And is that something you've always been drawn to? And did you do any front end when you were in college?
Actually, that's a good point. I think with my particular journey, and it's something I was like I think about quite a bit where during school, like even going into BCIT, I had no idea what development was. I thought it was just like dragging and dropping things and that type of stuff when it came to like building websites. And then I remember my first Java course, we went through like a for loop. I'm like, what the heck is this? What have I gotten myself into? So yeah, like with BCIT, I don't know if there was like actually a design or like a front end focused course. Like we did have a web development course, but it was more focused on like the development side of things. The only sort of thing that I knew going to the program is like I like creating things. Like throughout elementary school, like I always kind of like the design aspect of stuff. So that's kind of what sort of lured me, or like what brought me back after I did the network security program, was the fact that like with network security, it's kind of cool. Like it's cool on movies, but it just wasn't for me. Like I wasn't seeing anything visual. Like people don't like the pixel perfection aspect of front end development. I kind of do to a certain extent. So like I've always sort of been into design, and then like after a few months of being in BCIT, I've kind of got decent at coding, and like by being decent at coding and like liking design, it was kind of just like a natural progression into web development in a more front end focused manner.
For what it's worth, Geoff is actually quite stylistic. He's got the best aesthetic of apartments in my group of friends, as you can see behind him. So I think, nature versus nurture. I think your nature was to be drawn into the more aesthetic side of the house.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like I don't know. I can't explain it.
What's one part of the job that would surprise people?
Let me ask you that question. And let me ponder it. So like what is something that people are surprised about you when you talk about your job?
One thing that people would be surprised about in my job right now is the amount of graphs that I stare at least for me, I think it'd be very surprising. Mainly because in grade 12, when I was not paying attention for pre-calculus and like looking at graphs, I was like, who the heck is going to care about logarithmic scales or linear scales? Like none of this is going to matter. And now my day job involves looking at observability metrics and traces and seeing how a system is performing. And like logarithmic graphs are extremely important to be able to see like large amounts of traffic or requests. So I spend my day looking at a lot of graphs, more than I ever thought I would, especially in grade 12.
I think for me is the amount of communication with stakeholders, maybe. I feel like a lot of developers, and even for me, like a lot of people who go into development are sometimes, I don't want to like generalize and like stereotype, but are a little bit more introverted and just want to like stare at their code and deal with that. But like for me, like I do a lot of communication with different types of stakeholders. The way we built out our marketing website is we built it through a content management system, so a CMS. So like think like WordPress or Wix, but it's more custom.
Okay.
We built it out so that marketers can come in and build out simple pages as well. So what comes with that is sometimes they'll be blocked by something, or they won't understand the flow, or just not knowing how to do something. Like a lot of my time is also spent towards unblocking them. So I actually do a lot of like online tutorials and guides, and we have a Slack channel where essentially they just ask questions about how to do things, and I'm sort of acting as support for them. So there's a lot of like communication with stakeholders. So
shout out support.
Yeah, yeah, shout out support for sure. So yeah, we can go at it like two sides. Maybe you're not the best at coding. I feel like you can still succeed in tech if you got like the sociable skills, like the personable skills. And if you're not so good at the sociable skills and you're only good at the coding aspect, you'll probably want to like pick up some like, I don't know, some book that helps you improve on like the socializing skills and stuff like that. Like it definitely you progress in your career for sure. So you need both. You need both like the technical skills and the personable skills, I would say.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question a lot because I have a huge case of imposter syndrome where I still think I'm a very junior engineer. But when I think about myself and like how I would differ from someone that might be fresh out of school is the fact that like I still get stuck on very trivial problems, like literally forgetting the semicolon in the wrong place, like small things like that. But what I am very good at now, especially after more time in the industry, is that I'm very good at being able to communicate what my problem is to get help very quickly. Or when other people have questions, I'm very good at putting together information to answer those questions. And like I think that's where, like you mentioned, the personal skills, the social skills come into play. And I agree, because the social skills are like much harder to develop, whereas like engineering stuff, there's like books written on it. There's tons of books on it. Like you read Cracking the Coding Interview, data structures, you can learn that, knowing how to ask really good questions, or be personable or like approachable. Like that's something that you gotta really, practice at.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, and I feel like this is something that we can get into like hours upon hours on is like with AI. Like
Okay.
on to the point where ChatGPT is just straight up a better coder than me. So like out the window with my technical skills, like ChatGPT and AI, they're taking over. But like
Right.
if I'm in a face-to-face meeting with my manager, is ChatGPT gonna be able to help me out there? At this moment, I don't know. Maybe in 10 years it will be able to, but like at this moment, like you're not gonna be able to be like go into ChatGPT and hey, I'm talking to my manager. How should I respond to my manager? Give me something to reply. Like you're gonna have to have that personable skills to get through those interactions, right?
Right. Well, there goes my fun fact tip for new grads to use ChatGPT in their interviews. Just kidding. Don't do it. 100% don't do it. What is your spiciest or hottest take as a front end developer or manager?
Okay, this only applies to the state that our company is in right now, where we're trying to grow as fast as possible. And I think my spiciest take is that sometimes the best code is not cleanest code and like the most like manageable and like everything that you learn in the books type of code. Sometimes you kind of just need to push things out there to meet a deadline and to move the needle. And sometimes refactoring your code so that it fits a standard won't necessarily move that needle. It's not a big factor like when the higher ups are looking at things. I found that like I feel like early on in my career, I'd obsess with having to write the perfect code. Like I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to be structured in a way that like for future use it's just like easy to read. I even like put emphasis on like making it so that it was the most optimal in terms of like performance and all that stuff. And I think it really depends on the company too, right? Like maybe at Google, because they're so well established, they will put more focus on having clean code. But for the scrappy, smaller companies that are just trying to progress as fast as possible, sometimes it's not worth putting in the extra hours to making your code perfect.
Right.
So I think maybe that's my hot take or spicy take.
I think it's the trade-offs, right? Knowing when to make that trade-off.
Yeah, for sure. Like you need to know when is the right time to spend the time to implement like best practices and like really hone in on making your code manageable versus just throwing out a piece of crap out there, but it works and it's moving the.
I think you mean a minimum viable product, throwing out the MVP out there,
Exactly. Sometimes the MVP, which might not be the best on the back end or like the technical side where like codes where developers are looking, sometimes that's the best solution.
You heard it here first. MVPs all day.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I just pissed off the developers. So like we went full circle. So, good job of like putting me on the air to grow a target on my back from all these different people.
It's okay. We won't publish for a couple of weeks. You're safe for a couple more weeks.
Yeah. Let me enjoy it while I can.
What are one of the biggest trends or issues in your industry right now? And more specifically, if I were to go to a weekend party with all your high roller front end developer friends, what is something I could talk about and be able to easily fit in within the circles that you run in?
Okay, so this is more geared towards the marketing side of front end development. So if we're going back in the video, like website building. So I think like one of the biggest question marks is what the future is when it comes to the stack or the types of technologies that we're using, where we've kind of gone full circle over the years in terms of the types of technologies that are considered best practice. So in the very beginning, like it was very bare bones, right? Like you'd have HTML, you had CSS, and then you'd have like a sprinkle in of JavaScript. That's all you really needed to get the job done. But then at some point, some developer decided, okay, you know what? We actually need these full-blown React JavaScript frameworks to accomplish more intricate sites because that's what the user wants. And that's what's going to provide the developers with the best experience. So that's kind of where we're sort of at right now, where a lot of these like enterprise websites are built on things like Next.js or Gatsby.js or
the JavaScript framework of the week.
Yeah, like all these like React frameworks. But now it's getting to a point where we're going full circles and these people like to call themselves, this is just based on a video that I watched, which is really worth watching if you're into this stuff.
We'll link it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, it's by Rich Harris, but like link in the comments for sure. Where he sort of talks about the traditionalists coming back into the picture and actually sort of questioning why we went into this path of introducing these full blown React frameworks into marketing sites, where at the end of the day, like the marketing sites that we're producing and building, they don't need that much complexity. At the end of the day, we're just trying to present information. We don't need to do a lot to entice someone to use our application through the marketing site. So the traditionalists are coming in being like, okay, we actually don't need all those JavaScript frameworks. Let's actually go back to how things were, where it was kind of just basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But with the traditionalists, there are the modernists who still want the React frameworks. The thing is, there are some luxuries to have with these React frameworks. I personally like the developer experience and the fact that they're based on building sites through components. So going back again in the video, we talked about like component libraries and reusing code. I feel like these frameworks really enable that type of development. So there are just a lot of different people with different opinions on how we should be doing things. And maybe that applies to other fields as well, but that's kind of what the complexities are right now. It's like, who's in the right? Like now that I'm just like saying it out loud, maybe it's not a matter of like who's in the right, but like what makes sense in a certain context. Like sometimes it might just make sense to employ the framework and sometimes it doesn't. At the end of the day, like you need to understand what your business goals are and use those to figure out what your decision is in terms of the stuff. I feel like I'm learning things on the spot as I'm just like talking about them, but I think that's where
learning happens. I wonder if I go to a party now, if I'm just like, oh, the traditionalists and their lack of JavaScript must be nice to have a very easy load time. But as a modernist now, I can't really sleep without having my reusable components. Is that a phrase that would work? Oh, would I just be an idiot?
I feel like you'd be able to come across. Yeah. I think it'd work like a party where it's just like marketing developers. Yeah.
What would your phrase be if you were to like blend into a front end party? What would your
So it like depends. It depends if it's a party full of traditionalists or if it's a party full of modernists. If it's a party full of modernists, I'll be like, hell yeah, dude, React, baby, so sexy. Or maybe like phrasing it like that would get me kicked out of the party, but like React. What are the latest updates in React? Oh, did you see this patch or did you see this new feature with the framework? Or what are your thoughts on that? Like that's how you fit in with modernists. With the traditionalists, just tell them React sucks and they'll love it.
So it's all based around React.
Yeah. But here's the thing, again, like I want to emphasize this is just like the marketing side of things. With front end app development, and maybe I'm just like outdated and I don't know what's going on. I still think having a full blown front end application or front end framework still makes sense for that side, front end engineering.
I'm going to use that at the next front end party that I go to. With that, Geoff, thank you so much for being here with us. I wanted to open up now to let you have a chance to say anything that's been on your mind. Is there any final words you want to put out there? Anything that you would like everyone to know?
I feel like something that I really am beginning to kind of get over is the whole imposter syndrome. And it's not the fact that I've gotten over it. It's just that you realize you kind of just learn how to deal with it. I feel like in the beginning of my career, it's like, oh, crap, like I feel like I'm not doing as much as I should, or like I feel like there are just so many smarter people out there than me. But then you realize, oh shit, like I'm 6-7 years in my career, and like, yeah, sure, like I've learned the things that I needed to learn or that I thought I was lacking in like 5 years ago, but there's just like a whole new world of things that are just like blasted at me that I just don't know. And so it kind of like goes full circle. Like I'm still learning. And like with people who are in the beginning stages of their career, just know that like imposter syndrome, don't let it consume you. I feel like it affects more people, like even your seniors maybe, than you think it would. Just go at the pace that you think is working well for you. As long as you take it day by day, then that's all you can ask for. So yeah, again, like don't let imposter syndrome consume you is my piece of advice for people getting into the industry.
I think really good advice, and advice that you even told me a lot when we were both early in career, and I still need very often. With that, Geoff, thank you so much for being on our show today. You are the second guest on the Tech Related podcast. I've always valued your feedback and input throughout the years, and especially now, it's really cool to see how you've gone from being one of our only friends that's gone into the front end world and now has advanced further enough to actually go into leadership and management as well. Really appreciate your comments and thoughts on like, what the whole industry looks like as well as your thoughts on what it is being a leader and, continue to have these 1v1 one-on-ones. Thank you very much for being on the show. We hope you'll come back. And with that, where's the best place that people can find out more about what you're talking about?
Probably LinkedIn, but like I'm not too active. I can talk on and on about like the state of marketing websites. So if you shoot me a message on LinkedIn, then I'm willing to have a discussion for sure.
Debate traditionalism versus modernism on LinkedIn DMs. Geoff is open to those.
Just so I don't piss off anyone, like I'm not taking sides. Like I'm not a modernist. I'm not a traditionalist. I'm whatever makes sense to business case is. So yeah, I'm just trying to do some damage control here. Like I don't want to piss off.
And with that, thank you, Geoff, for being on this podcast. To everyone that's listening, we hope you enjoyed the show. Again, you can reach out to us and see all the speakers' notes and everything that Geoff referenced at techrelatedpodcast.com. If you have any feedback on the show and would like to let us know about it, whether it's good or bad, please send us an email at show@techrelatedpodcast.com. Thanks again for watching. We will see you next episode. Bring it out.